understanding of how we're to actually operate and what we're to do. Pray all these things in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 1, Paul writes, Therefore, my brethren, dearly beloved and longed for, my joy and crown. So stand fast in the Lord, my dearly beloved. Do you think that he loved these people? My brethren, dearly beloved and longed for, my dearly beloved. He wanted them to know that he loved them. And in the midst of this whole thing, he sandwiches this idea of the fact that they are his joy and crown. And why do you think they are? Why do you think the church in Philippi was his joy and his crown? His labor. Yeah, and they responded to it. This whole message is about rejoicing and having joy in difficult times. Well, they were in difficult times. Why were they in difficult times? Because they were fighting a spiritual battle and they understood it. And he was saying, you're my joy and my crown. What do you think brings your pastor great joy? Full of pews?
Joyful people.
Joyful people, right?
Guests, bringing guests.
Bringing guests?
Salvation.
When you see people grow.
Yeah. When you see people grow. This morning we were talking about that shepherd. And he started out in the lowlands. And what would happen if the shepherd's trying to get the flock to move, but there's a group that they don't want to move? What happens?
They're going to starve because the grass is going to run out.
Well, once they eat the grass all the way down, then what do they eat? They pull the roots up, and they'll eat the roots. And the whole time that they're in that area, what's accumulating? Their manure. And they are literally starving themselves out and opening themselves up to disease. What do you think that does for the shepherd? It grieves him. Because one, they don't want to move. And a flock needs to be what? On the move. To keep this from happening. If they would move, you will find that it's for their health and also the benefit of pasture lands. It's very healthy. And so, from my standpoint, a flock that's on the move is a flock that's healthy. A flock that's on the move is a flock that has opportunity to reproduce, and that was said. A flock that's on the move is an opportunity to make an influence and a difference. And so I suspect that the reason that Paul was writing this is because the church in Philippi was on the move. They were making a difference. They were making an impact. They were going through some difficult times, and he was telling them, you need to rejoice. And it's interesting because he's telling them, you need to rejoice, and at the same time telling them, you're bringing me great joy because you're continuing to move on. Are there difficulties and discouragements? Absolutely. There is. There's rejection. There's times when you don't see a lot of growth. There's times when you see pruning, and it is really, really tough. We've been talking on Sunday nights. I'm transitioning now to what we've been talking about the church. And what it is, and I want to talk a little bit about its function. It's definitely about proclamation, is it not? Our job is to proclaim. But there's also a very practical side of what the church is to do. And one of the identifying marks Jesus gives is in John 13. I'm going to start in 35 is where I'm going to end up. John 13:34. He says, "A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you should also love one another. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So what's one of the identifying marks that someone is a disciple of Christ? Love for what? What do we naturally love? Self. And in loving self, you have a tendency to love things. In the book of Philippians, chapter 2, he tells them to have the mind of Christ. And he goes to great extent to explain what that mind of Christ is. And then in verse 21, he says, "For all seek their own and not the things of Jesus Christ." We have a tendency to be selfish, and so one of the identifying marks as a disciple, a follower of Christ, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men, is you have love for one another. Why does that stand out? Because we live in a world where people are naturally what? Selfish. In fact, what they say is they'll look at it and go, "You don't have enough ambition." And so we'll use different language to frame it to where it looks like you're being very productive, but you are, it's just for the wrong kingdom. And we talked about that a little bit in Sunday school class this morning. So where would you learn this love from? Yeah. And so Jesus is the model for all of this. And this is who we really need to look to. And so if you really want to learn how to be a body of Christ, you've got to look to Jesus. Is there ever a time when Jesus proclaims this is why he came? You're like, well, yeah, sure. Which one are you talking about? Let's turn to Mark 10:45. Well, there are many other passages. This verse seems to really kind of nail it. It says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many." And so, if we're to look to Jesus as our example, and he ministered, we should do what? We should minister as well. And so, one of the really good examples of what this looks like is in John 13:14 and 15. And in John 13, what's happening in John 13? Do what? Well, yeah, that's what he's doing right there. So they're having the Passover meal, and this is where, during the midst of this, we see that he comes and he washes the feet of the disciples. So in verse 3 it says, "Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and come from God, he went unto God, and he would go unto God. He rises up from supper. He laid aside his garments. He took a towel and he girded himself. And after he poured water into a basin, he began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. So then when we go down to verse 14 and 15, it says, if then your Lord and Master has washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I've done unto you. So this is actually coming from Jesus' own mouth, that we need to be servants to one another. What do you think that experience is like? As a servant, but the person having to do it, you need to humble yourself, right? Is that a struggle for us? For some people? Yes, it was. Peter had an issue with it. And if you continue to read on, you're going to see that they have words. And why did Peter have an issue?
It was his master that was going to wash his feet. He didn't want that.
He knew that was backwards. But he takes it in a really weird place. He tells him, you got to wash all of me, right? And then Jesus uses that to say, you're clean except for one, and he's talking about Judas. And so, Peter saw that this seemed to be very unnatural with Jesus being in the position that he was in. He shouldn't be doing this sort of thing. But what Jesus was telling him is what you're used to seeing and that kind of kingdom of the Gentiles, that's not going to be the kind of kingdom that I'm going to set up. And that's why we see when we go back to Mark 10:45 is that he came to serve and to give his life a ransom. And so this is part of what it is that we're to do. What would be some ways today that we could do things that would require humility?
I think forgiveness.
Okay.
If you offended your brother, be humble enough to say, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The Bible tells us to confess our sins to one another. That is a very humbling experience.
Okay. What else?
To ask for help.
Okay. Ask for help.
If you have a brother that needs a need, I think you should
Okay.
help. That's probably the opposite of what it should be us. I want to be humbling towards them.
Okay. In our society, do we think we're better than certain other people? So if you went and ministered to those that you thought you were better than, would that require humility? What's interesting is we know that Jesus says, if you've done this to the least of these, you've done these to me. And the question is, who are the least of these? Because that's probably who I need to be serving. And that will require humility. Humility is an interesting thing, because as soon as you think you've got it, guess what? Pride slips in. Look at me, I'm super humble. Did you see all the stuff I did? If you get it, you get it. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, he starts this whole dialogue about the body metaphor. And the neat thing about this, and we've hit on this, is the body in and of itself is a picture of unity and diversity. Unity and diversity. This is where the term university came from. Unity and diversity, they're together. We don't always see that so much anymore, but that was the idea. How is the body united, but also have the diverse components to it? We touched on it this morning. What does the pancreas do, we learned? Secretes insulin. If the pancreas is suffering, can the liver pick up the slack? Probably not. It has a totally different function. But does the liver suffer if the pancreas isn't working? And so this is what Paul was trying to tell those in Corinth, is that there ought to be some unity in your diversity. And what's beautiful about this is every part is important. We covered this last time. Every part is important because it has a very unique function that it can fulfill. But without each part, we're not a whole. And so a lot of people don't realize that when they're not here, we're not whole. Does that make sense? There's been this push for about 5+ years about doing things virtually. It's not really in here. We need one another. So in that body, by way of rehearsing this, who's the head? Can somebody read Colossians 1:18?
Colossians 1:18. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, and that in all things he might have preeminence.
Okay. So we talked about how he's the head, he's the leader, and he determines what happens in the body. And he has determined that we ought to, in love, in humility, that we ought to proclaim the deliverance that he has provided. What do we call that? Do we not call that the Great Commission? And this is telling others about Christ. Where's that found? Yes, Matthew 28:19. Is there any place else? Mark 16. And so, is there any question about what we ought to do? We do a lot of things, and some of them aren't necessarily the main thing. I'd mentioned that the youth rally, it was ready, set, go. And so the whole idea was getting ready to prepare yourself to share the gospel. Being set is kind of being unmovable, like I'm not going to change on this, and then going. I'd also said that Galilee was having a youth rally, and people sent me text message, it's actually Harvest. And so a member from Galilee told me our church is having a youth rally. What he didn't tell me is he moved his membership. And so it's sharing the gospel. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is because we've actually demonstrated the love of Christ. You've heard they don't know how much, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Is that true? Nobody wants to hear a mean-spirited person. Nobody wants to hear someone that they think is legalistic. They want to hear someone that they know it is real. So living out the church as Christ's body requires practical choices day by day. Is that true? If my attitude is exactly like the world, and I try to share Christ with those I'm around, do they want to hear what I have to say? If my language is just like the world, do they want to hear what I have to say? If my actions are just like the world, do they want to hear what I have to say? What do they want to see? A difference. They want to see a transformed life. That's what they want to see. They also want to see someone that cares. Now, this is something I've observed from the congregation. We have members that when they're out shopping, they're not just shopping for themselves. Who are they shopping for? Others. So they see something on the shelf and they're like, oh, so-and-so loves this. So what do? They get it for them. Brother Drew, is that the way you shop? Do you shop like a squirrel? So this is squirrel shopping. You head into the parking lot and you find a spot. You get the spot, it's closest to the door, you run in and you map out which is going to be the closest way, and then you know which registers are going to be the least amount of kind of thing, and so you go in, get your thing, and you're out.
Yes, I did that.
Sounds like a military thing.
You're not perusing through. The last time I went, I found it online. I knew what aisle it was, and I was headed right for the aisle. That's the opposite of this. This is where you realize I'm amongst people. I could clearly be used of God. If there's someone there that greets you, you respond back. It isn't just, my undercover military, I got to get this thing in, reconnaissance. You notice people that are around about. You notice what's on the shelf. You notice the workers. Someone that has this mindset is aware of what's going on in other people's lives. They're calling, they're contacting, they're visiting, they're texting. People become very important to them. What is happening in someone else's life affects them. Why? Because they're a part of a body. And when one part of the body hurts, they all hurt. That isn't like, oh, that's right. Oh, this is, we know what you're going through, and we're going through it with you. How do you experience this? How do you get to this point? What happens is you got to be a part of a body that actually cares. Because that kind of empathy is infectious. You're like, man, I want to do that. It forms a culture in a community. And it actually happens through relationships. And so, just as you learn information from one another, you also can learn how to serve from one another. Does that make sense? How many of you carry jumper cables with you when you travel? Or a jump box, one of those little boxes. What does that mean? Like, you're carrying jumper cables. What does that mean? Like, I'm carrying jumper cables now. Why do you carry them?
Just in case.
Huh? Just in case, to be prepared. You've been stranded before. To assist. If you have jumper cables, yes, they can be a help to you, but you can also what? I know people that carry water. They carry water. They got like a little ice chest and they carry water. And everywhere they go, you know what they're doing? Hey, well, you want a water? Does it mean a lot to them? Does it mean more to the person receiving it? Because you just you're like, I got something. And so, it's a neat thing. How can we learn this from one another if we're not together? You can't. But here's the other thing. In what way should we be together? For just in the lecture or in the lab part 2? Just in the instruction or in the doing? In Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, we're used to this passage talking about not forsaking the assembling of ourselves. But to what end? It says, and let us consider one another to provoke unto love and what else? Okay, this is what Jesus did. He came to minister and to give himself a ransom. And so we talked about this morning that giving himself with a ransom was the greatest declaration of love. And so he came to minister and to demonstrate love. And so this is to provoke into love and good works. Same idea, love and ministry. And so we're to provoke one another to love and good works. What does it mean to provoke somebody? Do what?
To encourage, to...
Okay. I used to provoke people all the time, but I didn't realize you could do it in a good way. And this is in a good way. This is to spur them on, to stir them up so that they want to love. They want to do good things. This is why we've come together, is to encourage one another in love and good works. And so we're gonna stop the live feed right now, and we're gonna talk.